Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a general, or a duke, or even a petty thief with a flair for drama. No, tonight you're something far less glamorous. You're a patient at Bedlam Royal Hospital. Bedlam, they call it. Not because it's loud, though it is, but because the name itself has come to mean chaos. And you, poor thing, have just been admitted. You said something you shouldn't have, or didn't say something you should have. It's unclear. Someone signed a paper, a gate opened, and now you're here. Congratulations, you're about to experience the very cutting edge of 18th century psychiatric care. That edge is dull, rusty, and not especially clean. Before they take your shoes and start discussing your humours in the third person, do me a small favour. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always oddly comforting to see how far these quiet little horrors travel. If you'd like early access to future historical nightmares, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. You arrive just after sunrise, though the sky doesn't seem to notice. Grey clouds hang low over the chimneys, and the street outside still smells of yesterday's rain and the previous day's horses. The carriage doesn't stop completely. It simply slows long enough for the driver to nod at the porter and gesture towards you. He doesn't help you down. You step onto the wet cobblestones yourself, your boots slipping slightly, and the door slams shut behind you before you can ask where he's going. The gate is already open. That seems ominous somehow, as though they were expecting you. A man in a stained waistcoat holds the iron bars with one hand and a mug of something steaming with the other. He doesn't speak, just jerks his chin toward the inner court and waits. You hesitate. You've come with questions. You rehearsed them. Why am I here? Who signed the papers? There's been a mistake. You're ready to be reasonable, but the man turns his back before you can begin. The inside of the gatehouse smells of wet plaster, candle drippings, and a faint undercurrent of vinegar. The kind used to clean surfaces that never quite come clean. Another man, shorter, broader, less awake, sits at a desk covered in ledgers, broken quills, and a bowl of something that might once have been breakfast. He asks for your name but doesn't look up as you speak. You spell it carefully. He nods halfway through and writes something down without checking. You glimpse the page. Your surname has 2 letters reversed. That will be your name now. You're asked to remove your coat. And your gloves. You ask why. They don't answer. The shorter man raises a brow and sighs as though he's been through this before. He holds out a hand. You give him what he wants. You're not given a receipt. The corridor they lead you down is uneven. The stones slick underfoot and whispering with the faint scurry of something you hope is imaginary. You ask again if someone can explain what's happening. The man leading you doesn't answer. He has a ring of keys and walks like someone who stopped being surprised by anything, including you. Eventually, he stops at a thick wooden door with a metal grate near the top. He fumbles with the keys, selects one without looking, and opens it with a loud, scraping groan. The room beyond is narrow and bare, a cot with no blanket, a chamber pot tucked beneath it, a wooden stool missing a leg and propped awkwardly in the corner. The smell is immediate, straw that has been wet, dried and wet again. Something sour beneath it, mould in the walls, grief in the air. You turn to ask how long you're to stay here, but the man has already stepped back. You follow him instinctively, which earns a firm shove. Not violent, but practiced, rehearsed. You stumble into the room, catch yourself on the edge of the cot, and hear the door slam shut behind you. There is no lock you can reach from inside. You try the door anyway. It does not move. There's a small grate above the door, wide enough to allow air but not words. You speak through it anyway. Hello? Excuse me? Someone? Your voice sounds too loud, then too small. No one answers. You knock, then stop. You listen. You hear footsteps fading away, keys rattling like laughter. You sit on the cot. It creaks like it's warning you not to get comfortable. The straw mattress is thin and damp at one edge. There's something crunchy inside it that shifts when you move. You lift a corner and find a dead beetle, and what might have been a prayer once. A scrap of paper with a single name on it, nearly illegible. You tuck it back. There's no window. The light comes from a narrow slit near the ceiling, just wide enough to let in a stripe of dust and cold. You try to track the sun with it, but it never moves enough to help. You pace the room. 4 steps across, 2.5 from wall to cot. You repeat the route until it becomes part of your breath. Time slows. You sit. You stand. You lie down and then sit again, the way a caged animal circles not from instinct, but from the unbearable pressure of stillness. You try to count the hours. There is no bell, no meal, no voice to call you mad or sane. Just silence, broken now and then by a distant sound, a sob, a shriek, something heavy being dragged. You check the door once more, as if it might have changed its mind. It hasn't. You're not surprised. The room does not get warmer. If anything, the temperature seems to drop once the door locks behind you, as though the space itself resents being occupied. You rub your hands together for warmth, but they only grow damp. The stone walls sweat in the corners, and the straw mattress beneath you releases a slow, steady chill. You try to tuck your feet up to keep them off the floor, but the bed is too short. Your heels knock against the wood frame if you shift too far down. You try not to move. At some point, someone pushes a chipped basin of water through the hatch in the door. It arrives without explanation, without a sound. The water inside is cold and slightly cloudy. You dip your fingers in and immediately regret it. It smells faintly of lye and metal. You aren't sure if it's meant for washing or drinking. Possibly both. Possibly neither. You leave it on the floor. There's no blanket, just the stiff fabric of the mattress cover, which smells like damp bark and something worse beneath. You try to fold it around yourself, but it doesn't bend. The stuffing is uneven, clumping in some places and entirely absent in others. There's a rough seam running down the middle that digs into your spine if you lie flat. You shift onto your side and stare at the wall. It does not return the favour. At first, the silence is the worst part, the kind that presses against your eardrums and makes you feel like you're the only living thing in a building full of ghosts. Then, somewhere in the distance, someone begins to sob. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a slow rhythmic sound, like breathing that forgot how to settle. It goes on for a long time. You think about calling out, but the wall has already taught you what good that does. Eventually, the sobbing stops. It's replaced by something stranger, a low humming, tuneless and off-key. It might be a lullaby or a prayer, or just the sound someone makes when there are no other words left. It drifts through the corridor like smoke. You hold your breath without realizing it, waiting for the voice to falter or catch. It doesn't. It just fades, like everything else here. You try to distract yourself. You trace the mortar lines between the bricks with your eyes. You count the number of cracks in the ceiling, though you lose track halfway through and have to start again. You invent small, harmless lies about yourself. You are here for rest. You are here by choice. You are only visiting. You almost believe it, until you remember the look your cousin gave you before stepping back into the carriage. The light through the vent begins to shift. Not brighter or darker, just different, greyer, thinner. You realise you've lost track of how long you've been sitting. Your back aches. Your feet are numb. You haven't eaten, but you're not hungry. That part of your body seems to have gone quiet. Eventually, your head begins to nod. It's not sleep exactly, just surrender. You slide down the mattress, pulling the rough sheet as high as it will go, which isn't far. You curl onto your side, knees pressed to your chest, and close your eyes. The stone beneath the cot seems to hum with cold. You pull your coat tighter, though it does little good. The mattress crackles softly with every breath you take, and you wonder how many others have breathed here before you. Just as your thoughts begin to blur, just as your body begins to forget the posture of fear. You hear a scream. It is sudden, raw, far too human. It cuts through the silence like a hot knife through ice. You jolt upright, heart pounding, blanket sliding to the floor. You wait, holding your breath, listening for a reply. None comes. The scream is not followed by a scuffle, or a door slam, or even footsteps. It hangs there, unresolved, before dissolving into the walls. A moment later, another voice cries out, this one raspier, as though it's been screaming for years and only now remembered why. You hear something slam against wood or stone or both. Someone is shouting now. Not words, just sound. Fear or rage or the kind of confusion that curdles into panic. It echoes oddly, bouncing through the corridors in strange directions. You can't tell how far away it is. It could be 5 doors down, or next to yours. You sit on the cot with your knees drawn up, too cold to sweat and too alert to rest. The straw beneath you is lumpy and loud, as if it resents being compressed. You want to stand, to move, to do something, but there's nowhere to go. The room is a box, and you're exactly where someone meant for you to be. Eventually, the shouting fades, not because anything has been resolved, but because it's been absorbed into the routine. There is no response, no footsteps to hush it, no keys rattling in reprimand, no nurse, no keeper, just quiet again, heavy and complete, as though the building has swallowed the noise and gone back to sleep. You lie down again. This time, it's harder. The mattress has shifted beneath you, and your shoulder aches from the angle. You try to get comfortable, but nothing here is meant for comfort. You pull the sheet over your ears and tell yourself the worst is over. But somewhere, further down the corridor, someone begins to laugh. And you don't know why, but that's worse than the screams. You don't know what time it is when they come for you. It might be morning, it might be evening. The light in the corridor hasn't changed, and your body no longer bothers to tell you when it's rested. You're awake when the bolt scrapes back. That's the only certainty left. A man with a sour expression gestures for you to follow. He doesn't offer a reason, and you've learned not to ask. The corridor is longer than you remembered, or perhaps your sense of distance has warped. You walk past several doors like your own, each closed tight. From one, you hear quiet muttering. From another, a rhythmic tapping like a spoon against a stone wall. No one else is walking. No one else is speaking. You try to count your footsteps, but lose track before you reach the end of the hall. They lead you into a larger chamber, with high, grimy windows, and 2 desks placed side by side. At one sits a thin man in a black coat, with ink-stained cuffs, and a blotting pad that's already damp with today's work. At the other is someone dressed like a physician, white cravat, waistcoat too clean for this building, eyes that never settle. Between them is a chair. You're told to sit. The physician begins with your name, not because he doesn't know it, but to see if you do. You say it quietly, carefully. He nods, then mispronounces it on purpose. The clerk writes it down the way he hears it. You consider correcting them, then decide against it. You've seen what happens to people who speak too much in this place. They ask where you're from, what you do, whether you've had visions or fits or troubling dreams. They don't ask what kind of dreams. That doesn't matter. You try to keep your answers short. Factual. You were grieving, you say. It was expected. You stopped eating for a few days, yes, but only because the food turned your stomach. No, you've never heard voices. You've only heard other people say that you did. The physician taps his fingers against the side of the table with increasing impatience. He doesn't write anything down. That's the clerk's job. The clerk, for his part, has already begun summarizing you in tidy Latin phrases: morbus mentis, melancholia hysterica, delirium sine feber. You're not sure which of those belong to you, but they all end the same way, underlined and filed. They ask if you've ever struck anyone. You say no. They ask if you've ever refused instruction. You hesitate, then say no again. The hesitation is noted. They ask if you believe yourself to be sane. You blink, unsure how to answer. If you say yes, it means you think you know better than them. If you say no, it proves their point. You reply that you don't know. The physician smiles as if that's clever. The clerk writes, "Denies madness." He holds up a small object, a candle snuffer, and asks what it is. You answer. He nods, then asks what day it is. You pause. That information, once easy, has floated away from you like steam. You say Wednesday. He doesn't tell you if you're right. The clerk writes, "Disoriented." You try to explain that this place is confusing, that you haven't been told the time, or even how many days you've been here. The physician sighs as though you've said something dull. He leans back and asks about your family. Do you have a history of melancholy, of drink, of obstinacy? You start to answer, then realise you're not sure what counts. Your aunt wept for years after her husband died. Your brother once locked himself in a room and didn't speak for 3 days. Is that illness, or just living? They ask about your faith. You say you were raised properly, that you attend when you're able. The physician presses, "Has God spoken to you recently?" You say no. "Has the devil?" You say no again. The physician frowns. The clerk writes, "Denies spiritual delusions." Then comes the silence, the worst part, the long pause where neither man speaks. You sit very still in your chair and try not to blink too often. The physician steeples his fingers. The clerk begins tidying his notes. You are no longer part of the conversation, though you haven't been dismissed. Finally, the physician looks at the clerk and says, "Mania, likely complicated by melancholia." The clerk nods, already scribbling. "Possibly hysteria," he adds, almost as an afterthought. The words feel clinical and unearned, like gossip dressed in robes. You open your mouth to object, then close it. The decision has already been made. You were never really in the room. A third man enters. He's younger, with the sort of eyes that never quite meet yours. He carries a slate with your new information scratched across it. Ward assignment, initials, diagnosis. He gestures for you to follow. You rise slowly, legs stiff from the chair. The physician does not look at you again. The clerk is already calling for the next name. The hallway outside smells like damp linen and rotting wood. You try to read the slate in the young man's hands, but he pulls it away before you can see. It doesn't matter. Your future has already been transcribed. You don't know what ward you're being sent to. You don't know what the word mania means to them. You only know that it has weight, that it has been spoken aloud, and now it will follow you. You are led down another corridor, this one with lower ceilings and dimmer light. You pass a door with iron bars and another with claw marks in the wood. You wonder what that room's occupant was diagnosed with, or whether they were ever diagnosed at all. At the end of the hall is a heavy door with a name stenciled above it. You don't recognise the name, but it sounds final. The man with the slate unlocks it without speaking and ushers you in. Inside, the air is thicker, warmer, noisier. Someone is laughing in the corner. Someone else is humming. A third figure stares at the wall like it's telling her secrets. The door shuts behind you, sealing you into the ward. And for the first time, you understand what the word assignment really means. The corridor leading to the women's ward is narrower than the others, and the light thins with every step, as if reluctant to come any farther. You trail behind the young attendant, who doesn't speak and doesn't slow his pace even when you stumble slightly on a loose stone or catch your coat on a splintered door frame. He seems practiced at ignoring the sound of footsteps that hesitate. The air thickens the farther you go. It smells of rot and vinegar, overlaid with something sour and distinctly human. Unwashed bodies, spoiled linen, stale breath thickened by confinement. The scent clings to your throat, makes you breathe shallowly. Your fingers tighten around your coat sleeves, as though a little more fabric might shield you from what's ahead. You pass rooms with half-open doors and barred windows. Inside, women move in ways that make you ache to look away. One rocks silently on a low bench, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Another murmurs a prayer into her sleeve, lips moving with frantic repetition, hands twitching at every invisible beat. A third stands in the corner of her room, perfectly still, except for the slow chewing motion of her jaw, gnawing on the ends of her hair with mechanical patience. No one acknowledges you as you pass, and yet, somehow, you feel observed. Not by the nurses, though one glances up from a cracked ledger and offers a nod, so absent it might have been meant for someone else, but by the place itself, as though the building is taking your measure, filing you under something. The attendant opens a door on the left. It's not marked, but you know it's yours. He gestures you inside and hands you a bundle, a folded cloth that passes for a blanket, a tin cup, and a sliver of yellowing soap. When you ask how long you'll be staying here, he blinks once, then closes the door without answering. The room is larger than the one they locked you in on your first night, but not by much. It has 3 cots pushed against 3 separate walls, as if the space were meant to give the illusion of privacy while withholding the substance. There's a single window, barred and so grimy that light filters through like smoke. Beneath it, a rusted basin and a shared chamber pot mark the limits of hygiene. 2 other women occupy the room. One lies on her side, eyes open but unfocused, staring at nothing with the kind of stillness that feels practiced. Her hair is grey at the roots and matted near the ends, and her hands curl tightly around the edge of her blanket. The other sits upright on her cot, legs crossed beneath her, humming softly to herself. She watches you without expression, head tilted slightly, as though trying to decide whether you're real. You nod politely, say nothing, and move to the unclaimed bed. The mattress is thinner than it looks. The frame creaks with even the slightest pressure. You sit with careful formality, keeping your hands in your lap and your eyes low. It feels safer that way. Polite, non-threatening. You're trying to be forgettable. The woman who had been humming stops abruptly. You glance up to find her still watching you. Then, without speaking, she resumes her song, off-key and tuneless, something closer to a lullaby drained of memory. You nod again. She doesn't respond. The third woman finally blinks, not at you, just in general. She shifts slightly under her blanket and releases the corner she'd been clutching. One hand flutters weakly toward her face, then falls back. You wonder if she sees you. You wonder how long she's been here. You wonder if she knows. There are no introductions. No nurse comes to explain the rules. No chart appears on the wall. No schedule is offered. You learn by watching. When the door opens, both women look up, but neither stands. When a metal tray is brought in with 3 bowls and 3 slices of something that once resembled bread, the humming woman collects it without thanks, distributes it without speaking. You wait for a signal that it's your turn. There isn't one. You eat when the others do. Later, a bell rings somewhere in the corridor. It's the first structured sound you've heard since entering the ward. Neither of your roommates reacts with surprise, which is how you learn it happens often. The humming woman removes her shoes and lies down. The blank one turns to face the wall. You do the same, not because you're tired, but because not doing so feels conspicuous. There is no privacy here, only the illusion of separation. Every shift of the mattress, every cough, every whispered murmur passes through the space like wind under a door. You hear one woman snore softly, the other breathing in uneven rhythms. You try not to move. You try not to be noticed. But even in silence, you begin to understand the rules. If you cry, cry quietly. If you refuse food, do it discreetly. If you stare too long, you might be mistaken for a threat. If you say too little, you might be mistaken for nothing at all. Both are dangerous. You learn quickly that survival here means walking a tightrope strung between invisibility and obedience. No one tells you how long you'll be in this room. No one tells you if these women are improving, or if this is where they're sent when improvement is no longer expected. There is no mention of treatment, no talk of release, only the assumption that this is where you belong now. Not because you're ill, but because someone said you were. You lie down on your cot and pull the thin blanket over your shoulder. The mattress squeals as you shift. No one comments. That too feels like a rule. You keep your hands folded near your chest and stare at the ceiling. There is a stain above your bed in the shape of a handprint. You tell yourself, it's just mildew, and for the first time since arriving, you no longer ask what mistake brought you here. You begin to ask what mistake will keep you. The nurse wakes you before the light. She doesn't knock. The door creaks open just enough for her face to appear, lips pressed tight in a line that might once have meant something. She holds a lantern in one hand and gestures with the other. You sit up slowly. There's no bell, no call, no explanation, just motion and the expectation that you'll follow it. You aren't given time to dress properly. You slip your shoes on over bare feet and wrap your coat tighter. The other two women in your room are already standing. One is murmuring again, something half prayer, half chant, as she straightens the folds of her blanket. The other rubs at her eyes and shuffles toward the hallway without looking at you. You fall into step behind them. Breakfast is served in a narrow room that might once have been a storage closet. It still smells of wood rot and old starch. There's no table, just a shelf running along one wall, where you're expected to eat standing up. A nurse, different this time, younger, with a sharp nose and dull eyes, hands you a bowl of something wet and grey. It's bread or what's left of it, soaked in vinegar until it falls apart under the weight of your spoon. You eat it slowly, carefully. It burns slightly at the back of your throat. You don't ask for more. When the bowls are taken away, the nurse checks your hands and face. She nods once, at what you're not sure, and moves to the next woman. You're led back to your room to empty your chamber pot. The nurse watches as you lift it. She doesn't help, but she makes a note in the ledger she carries pressed against her hip. You don't ask what she's writing. No one ever tells you what's been written. Then come the chores. They're presented as activities. You are not asked if you'd like to participate. Instead, you're handed a bucket and a rag and told to wipe down the windowsills in the corridor. Another woman is sent to sweep the ward floor. One is given a brush and directed to scrub at the stones near the entrance. Stones that have already been scrubbed daily, for what must be years. You try to do what you're told with the correct level of visible effort. Too little, and you're lazy. Too much, and you're agitated. The line is fine, and never clearly marked. The chores are meant to be therapeutic. That's the word the nurses use anyway. They say it like it's a kindness, a cure, something that might bring you back to yourself, but it feels less like recovery and more like erosion, as though the aim isn't to restore you, but to file you down into something smooth, silent, and useful. When the work is done, or rather, when the nurse decides it is, you're allowed a period of reflection. This takes place in a sitting room, where the chairs are all bolted to the floor, and the windows are painted shut. You sit among the others staring at walls that have absorbed too many years of watching. One woman whispers to herself in the corner. Another giggles at nothing in particular. The rest sit like furniture. You join them. You learn quickly that silence is safest. The room grows hot around midday. The fire is too large for the space, and the air begins to feel thick, sour with breath and wool. You begin to nod off, your head drifting forward on your chest, but a sharp word from the nurse jolts you upright. Napping is discouraged. It suggests idleness, or withdrawal, or malingering. You keep your eyes open until they sting. Lunch comes later than it should. Another slice of vinegar-soaked bread, this time with something gelatinous beside it. Meat, possibly, or the memory of it. You chew slowly, aware of the nurse's eyes moving along the line. You finish every bite. The woman next to you doesn't. Her bowl is taken away early. She's told she'll feel it later. You don't ask what that means. The afternoon repeats the morning. More chores, more sitting, a brief walk through the outer corridor, supervised by 2 nurses and limited to 10 minutes. You take small, careful steps, conscious of how your body occupies space. You've learned that walking too quickly is suspicious. Walking too slowly is worse. You move just enough. Someone in the ward sings under her breath as she walks. A nurse tells her to stop. She doesn't. The nurse says it again, louder. The singing stops. That's the last time you hear the woman's voice for the rest of the day. By the time you're returned to your room, your arms ache and your legs are stiff. You're told to wash your face in the basin, which has not been emptied since the morning. You do it anyway. The cloth you're handed smells like mildew and old soap. You try not to breathe through your nose. The other women in your room perform the same ritual with identical movements. You wonder if they were taught, or if it just happens over time. When the nurse checks your chamber pot again, she nods and says, "Better." You don't know what's better. You don't know if you want to know. She makes another note in the ledger and steps out. Supper is a repetition of lunch, a bowl, a crust, a cup of water that tastes like tin. Afterward, you're told to sit on your bed and wait. You do. You've learned not to speak during this part of the day. It's quieter than morning, but heavier, like the ward is winding down into something that doesn't sleep, only shifts its weight. Finally, the nurse returns. She checks the room, counts the bowls, nods to herself. She closes the door behind her with the sound of something ending. You hear the bolts slide into place. That is the true signal of night. You lie down on the mattress without undressing. The blanket covers your shoulders, but not your feet. You stare at the ceiling again. The crack above you has shifted, or your perception has. You watch it until it looks like it's watching back. It happens without warning. You're folding your blanket along the seam, as you've learned to do during the early morning wait, when the door creaks open and a nurse gestures for you to follow. She doesn't say where you're going. None of them ever do. The tone in her eyes is clear enough. Not a question. You glance once at the other women. Neither moves, neither looks at you. That, more than anything, tells you this is routine. She leads you down a different corridor than before. Shorter, better lit, though the light itself is flat and watery. The air here smells of burnt cloth and dried herbs. Somewhere, behind one of the closed doors, you hear a wet cough. The nurse says nothing, even when you hesitate at a junction. Her grip on your arm tightens just slightly, guiding you forward. The room they bring you to has a chair in the centre, wooden and straight-backed, with long stains down the legs. There's a tray beside it. You don't need to look closely to see the tools. A basin, a cloth, a razor. All of it clean enough to appear respectable, but not so clean that it seems new. The physician from your intake stands nearby, wearing the same expressionless stare he gave you before. The clerk is not here today. That somehow feels worse. You're told to sit. You do. The nurse pulls your sleeve up past the elbow, revealing the soft bend of your arm. The physician says nothing, doesn't tell you what's being done, or why, or how long it will take. He simply dips the razor into a jar, wipes it once on the cloth, and makes a small mark with chalk. You think he's still preparing. Then the blade touches skin. It is not a clean cut, not a deep one either. Just enough to bring blood up in a slow, reluctant line. He presses the basin beneath your arm and waits. You watch the blood drip, then trail, then slide. You want to ask how much is enough, but you're not sure you're supposed to speak. After a while, your arm begins to feel light. The physician makes another small nick just above the first. The second cut bleeds faster. The nurse watches with vague interest, as though reviewing a recipe she's followed 100 times. When the physician finally withdraws the basin, the blood inside sloshes faintly. You expect the cloth next. You expect him to press it to your skin, to wipe, to bandage. Instead, he nods once and walks away. The nurse ties a length of linen around your arm, not tightly, but with enough tension to hold. The blood continues to pulse beneath it. She guides you to your feet. You sway. Your stomach lurches slightly. She doesn't wait for you to steady yourself before leading you into the next room. This one is colder, not by degrees, but by intent. The windows are open just enough to let in the outside air, and the draft slides across the floor like something alive. In the centre of the room stands a wooden bench. Behind it, a bucket. Beside it, a pitcher that smells faintly of iron. Another nurse waits there, older, with red knuckles and a damp apron. You're told to kneel. You do. The stone beneath your knees is rough, and your hands tremble as you brace yourself. You want to ask what this is. You want to ask if this is punishment or treatment, but the difference here seems largely semantic. The older nurse lifts the pitcher and tilts it forward. The water is not cold, it is arctic. It strikes your shoulders and immediately steals your breath. You gasp, but that only invites more of it into your lungs. Another pitcher follows the first, then a third. You lose track of the count. Your skin begins to sting, then burn, then go numb. When you try to stand, a hand presses you back down. Firm, but not cruel. Just part of the process. At some point, you scream. Not from pain exactly, but from the shock of being held underwater while not being submerged. The scream earns no reply. The nurse merely says, "Good," she's responding. You wonder what they say about the ones who don't. When it's over, your dress clings to your back and legs. Your hair drips steadily into your eyes. You're not offered a towel. You're not told it's finished. The younger nurse simply gestures again, and you follow her back through the corridor, water trailing behind you like a signature. Your room feels warmer when you return, but only because your body has been stripped of heat. The other two women glance up as you enter. One of them shifts slightly to make space, even though there was no threat of you sitting anywhere else. You move to your cot, sit down, slowly, and wrap your arms around yourself. The blanket is still dry, but it smells faintly of the last person who used it, and that feels oddly comforting. You aren't told what the treatment was for. You aren't told when the next one will be. You only know that they called it shock balancing, and that tomorrow or the day after, or perhaps later today, they will balance something else. The spinning chair was in the corner of the first room. You saw it as they led you out. Its straps were cracked with age, its frame worn smooth by hands and sweat. It did not move while you were there, but it was waiting. You sit on the edge of the bed for a long time, not moving. The dampness creeps through your shift and clings to your skin, but you don't reach for the blanket. Across the room, the humming woman watches you, her song paused on a breath that never finishes. The other woman turns to the wall again. You touch your bandaged arm and feel nothing beneath the linen. No sting, no heat, just a faint echo, like the memory of pain long after it's gone. They tell you to wash. That's how you know something is different. Not a suggestion. Not the usual muttered, "You'll feel better after a rinse." No, this is a command. The nurse stands in the doorway, with a cloth draped over her arm and a thin bar of soap that smells like ash. "Visitors today," she says. "Try to look presentable." You blink at her, unsure whether you heard correctly. Visitors? You haven't received a letter, a message, a name. You haven't written any either. But she isn't referring to family. She means strangers. People from outside. People with coins and clean gloves who want to see where their charitable contributions go. She doesn't wait for a response. The cloth and soap are placed on the foot of your cot. She tells you you'll have 5 minutes at the basin. She's already moving to the next room before you've stood up. The water in the basin is cold and still smells faintly of the woman who used it before you. You do your best. You wipe your face, your hands, the backs of your ears. You scrub under your nails with a piece of wood someone left behind. It's not enough, but it's something. Your shift is stained, but you smooth it down and try to straighten the collar. You pinch colour into your cheeks. You remember doing that once, years ago, before a festival. It feels obscene now. They lead you into a different hall, this one wider, with tall barred windows and peeling green paint that someone once thought would be calming. The benches are lined up against one side, a narrow rail between you and the rest of the world. You're told to sit and wait. No speaking, no touching, no standing unless instructed. You sit beside women from other wards. Some twitch and fidget. Some stare at the wall. Some are too far gone for posture. One chews the hem of her shift like it holds a secret she's trying to swallow. Another has wet herself, and no one moves to clean it. There is no separation between the quiet ones and the loud. You are not arranged by diagnosis or risk or clarity, only by how many fit on a bench. And then the doors open. They don't creak like you expected. They swing outwards smoothly, almost gracefully, as though well oiled for the occasion. The first visitors enter in pairs, walking slowly, hands behind their backs like they're touring a garden. Men in waistcoats and powdered wigs. Women in hats that have never seen rain. A boy clutching a small biscuit in one hand and his mother's skirts in the other. A priest who blesses himself before looking at anyone. They begin to walk the row. At first they're quiet, reading the signs posted above each bench if there are any, whispering among themselves. But soon the silence breaks. One man points at a woman 2 seats away from you and asks the nurse if that one ever bites. The nurse replies, only when she wants to leave. A ripple of laughter follows. Someone taps the iron rail with a cane and watches for your reaction. You try not to move. The boy inches closer. He has a smear of jam on his chin and a coin clutched in his hand. He stares at you too long. Then he asks, will she do something? His mother shushes him, but the nurse says, she's a quiet one, watch the next. The boy does not stop watching you. He crouches slightly, presses his face between the bars and whispers, do you bite? You don't answer. He throws the coin at your feet anyway. It clinks once and rolls toward the bench leg. You consider picking it up. You consider what that would mean. You don't move. The next group is louder. A woman in pale gloves wants to know what your condition is. The nurse answers on your behalf, says you're melancholic, with hysteric tendencies. She uses the word grief in a tone that suggests indulgence. You look at the floor. You don't remember saying anything about grief. Or maybe you did. Maybe they heard it in your voice in the way you breathed during the first week. Maybe they just assumed. More visitors come. More coins are dropped. One man calls another over to, look at the one with the eyes. You realise he means you. He asks if you were ever married. You say nothing. The nurse says, briefly. You weren't. The heat builds in the room. The air thickens with perfume and wool and breath. Someone starts humming behind you. One of the visitors says it's eerie. Another says it's charming. One of the women on the end begins to weep, soft and long, like a kettle left to boil. No one moves to stop her. No one moves to comfort her either. The visitors begin to move toward the door. Their curiosity is waning. They've had their fill. As they leave, one of the men presses a coin into the nurse's hand and says, good show. She thanks him. The door closes. The room exhales. You do not. You're told to return to your room. There's no mention of whether the display went well or whether you met expectations. You pass the hallway window on the way back and see the boy again, walking toward a carriage. He turns once and points back at the building. His mother slaps his hand down. In your room, no one speaks. The other 2 women are where you left them. One is lying down. The other stares at the wall like it's become something else entirely. You sit on the cot and unclench your fists. You hadn't realised they were tight. You do not cry, you do not speak. You simply let the silence settle over you like dust. And in that silence, you understand something quietly awful. You weren't being punished. You were being useful. You wake to find a stranger in the doorway. She's wearing the same uniform, apron over a pale blue dress, sleeves rolled just short of the wrist. but everything about her feels unfamiliar. She carries herself differently, taller, straight. She doesn't knock or greet you, just steps inside and sets a tray on the windowsill, like it's hers to use. The tea is in a different cup than yesterday. The spoon is wood instead of tin. The bread is cut thinner. You sit up slowly and say, "Good morning, miss." It's what the other nurse liked, a small show of politeness, respect. But this one stops moving the moment the word leaves your mouth. Her eyes narrow, like you've said something indecent. She doesn't respond, just lifts the tray and sets it again, harder, as if you'd questioned her competence instead of acknowledging her presence. You don't speak again. At breakfast, your seat is wrong. You've taken the same place for weeks now. Third from the left, facing the outer wall. But today, the others shift before you can sit, and suddenly your spot is gone. You hover, unsure. The new nurse walks past without pausing, without offering direction, without looking at you at all. You choose another seat. She snaps her fingers and tells you not to move until instructed. When the tray arrives, you reach for your spoon and feel it, sharp and fast, a slap across your knuckles. Not hard enough to bruise, just enough to sting. You freeze, confused. She sets the spoon down, an inch farther to the left, then waits. You realise you were supposed to wait too. You murmur an apology. She says nothing, but she writes something down in the little book she keeps tucked beneath one arm. Later, during chores, you begin wiping the windowsill before being told. It's what the last nurse expected. Initiative, order, evidence of recovery. But this nurse calls it rushing. She tells you to stop, then a few minutes later scolds you for not continuing. You try to explain that she gave a conflicting instruction. She cuts you off and says it isn't your place to question routine. You want to ask what the routine is, but that would be another question, and you're starting to learn. The rest of the day unspools like a badly tied knot, everything slack in the wrong places and pulled tight in others. The sitting room is opened early, then locked again without warning. You're told to speak during reflection, then punished for speaking too much. When you sit silently, the nurse stares until you feel compelled to speak again. This time, she sighs and walks away. One woman is praised for folding her blanket neatly. The next is told that doing the same is fussy. You see another woman standing too close to the nurse's ledger. She's made to kneel in the corridor for an hour. When she finally returns, her hands are red from the cold floor, and she won't look at anyone. That night, the chamber pot is in the wrong corner. It's always been beside the cot near the window, but someone moved it, and no one says why. You return it to its usual place. In the morning, you're reprimanded for tampering with ward hygiene. You try not to react. You nod when spoken to. You follow every command with the posture of obedience. Still, she writes in the book. The others stop meeting your eyes. You notice it first with the humming woman. She turns her head now when you enter the room. Not in fear or malice, but with the practiced deflection of someone who's already seen this unfold before. The quiet woman, the one who used to cry when she thought no one was listening, keeps her back to you now. Her blanket is pulled up high. Her breathing never changes. You realise you've become dangerous, not because you've done anything, but because you haven't learned the new rhythm quickly enough. You're off beat, out of step, not yet in tune with whatever code governs this nurse's gaze. And the others know that to be near someone out of sync is to draw attention to yourself. You understand. You'd avoid you too. One afternoon, you're told to recite the names of the ward staff. You begin with the old names. You're corrected. The new ones are said quickly, as though they've always been here. You nod as if you knew them. You repeat them as best you can. You mispronounce one. The nurse narrows her eyes and asks if you're mocking her. You are not. The nurse says your tone is sharp, that it was not respectful. That tone is a form of dissent. You bow your head. You apologise again. She records something in the ledger. You notice that she never erases. That night, your tea is withheld. No explanation is given. You aren't even sure if it's punishment. Perhaps she forgot. Or perhaps it was deliberate. You try to ask, she says nothing. You stop asking. In the silence that follows, something inside you shifts, a subtle folding. You begin to move through the ward with your head tilted slightly downward, your eyes fixed on things that cannot be misinterpreted. Walls, floors, your own hands. You speak only when necessary, and even then with caution, with rounded edges. You study her face each morning for clues and adjust yourself accordingly. You become quiet, not as an act of defiance, not even from fear, just because it is safer to take up less space. You are not improving, but you are becoming easier to manage. And here, that's close enough. They come for you after breakfast. There's no warning, no explanation, just a brief nod from the head nurse and the quiet appearance of two attendants at your elbow. One holds a length of cloth, the other carries a ledger. You don't ask where you're going. You already know that asking only makes things worse. You rise and follow, tucking your hands into your sleeves, like a schoolgirl, trying not to fidget. You're taken to a part of the building you've never seen. The hallway curves in a way that feels deliberate, designed to confuse your sense of orientation. The windows are higher here, and the floors are smoother, almost polished. The air smells different too, sharp with soap and something chalky beneath it, like powdered plaster or dried bone. One of the attendants hums softly, tunelessly, as he walks ahead. The other hasn't spoken once. The room is circular. You notice that immediately. Not square like the others, no corners. Just a rounded wall of pale stone, broken by small slits near the ceiling for ventilation. In the centre of the floor stands a tall wooden chair mounted on a low platform. Straps hang from the arms and legs like pale leather ribbons. The chair doesn't move yet, but you can feel that it's meant to. They call it balance therapy. You're told to sit, you do. The wood is worn smooth from decades of repetition. The straps are drawn snug, across your wrists, your ankles, your chest. One loops over your forehead, holding you against the tall, unforgiving backrest. You expect to be told what to do, to breathe deeply, to count to 10. But no one speaks. The nurse nods once and the man behind you begins to turn the crank. The first rotation is slow, measured, like a demonstration. The second is faster. You feel the chair begin to shudder slightly under the strain. Your vision blurs at the edges, but you keep your eyes open, trying to stay present, trying to track some point on the wall to anchor yourself. It doesn't help. By the fifth turn, your stomach is lurching in small miserable jolts. Your tongue feels loose in your mouth. You want to ask how long it will last, but your jaw is pressed too tightly to form the words. You manage a grunt, polite, questioning, but no one answers. The crank turns again. The room becomes a blur. It's not just dizziness, it's disassembly. Your organs feel as though they're shifting against one another, sliding into new positions. Your heartbeat loses rhythm. Your fingertips tingle. Your head jerks forward slightly, only to be caught by the strap. The pressure across your chest digs deeper with every rotation, and your legs have gone numb at the knee. You try again to speak, just one word. Stop. But it comes out broken, muffled, halfway between a breath and a whimper. Someone in the corner says, "She's resisting." You hear the scratch of quill on paper. The spinning doesn't stop. You start to beg, not loudly, just a whisper, a plea. "Please," you say, again and again, though each time it sounds weaker, more distant. Your voice becomes another symptom, another line in the report. They do not reply. The crank turns steadily, mechanically, like time itself, uninterested in suffering, but content to record it. Eventually, the nausea wins. It rises without warning and forces itself up your throat, acidic and immediate. You retch. The mess catches on your dress, drips down onto your lap, pools beneath the chair. The spinning slows, not from mercy, but because the mechanism has begun to resist. You slump forward as much as the strap allows, head lolling slightly, eyes half closed. You feel your body go limp, not from sleep, not from peace, just a kind of vacancy, like someone has stepped out of you and forgotten to return. The straps are undone. The nurse says something about compliance. One of the attendants mutters, "Docile now." You don't respond. You couldn't if you tried. As they carry you toward the doorway, your legs too soft to walk, your chin resting on your collarbone, you hear clapping. It comes from above, somewhere beyond the vents. Light applause. Not from the nurses, from the gallery. You hadn't noticed the viewing slip before. Visitors, again, watching. One of them laughs, a man's voice. He says something about spinning tops and strong stomachs. The nurse says, "She did well." You do not agree, you do not disagree, you do not speak. They take you to a side room, one used for clean-up. You're not the first. The basin is already streaked with bile. Your dress is removed. A damp cloth is pressed to your face. You're told to rinse your mouth and given a fresh shift, thin and poorly fitted, but dry. You do as you're told, not because you're calm, but because stillness is easier than resistance. When they lead you back to the ward, no one looks up. The other women have seen this before. The spinning is not new, it is simply your turn. You shuffle to your cot and sit down, but you don't lie back. You stare at your hands and realise they're trembling. You tuck them under your thighs to make it stop. Your stomach still turns when you close your eyes. You try to breathe deeply, but the room feels too narrow, too stale. You press your tongue against the roof of your mouth and taste metal. You don't know if it's from the bile or the blood. Later, you hear the nurses speaking outside the door. "That one was easier than expected," one says. "Should respond well to repetition." You understand now that therapy here is not meant to cure. It's meant to reduce, to simplify, to make you quiet enough that no one has to explain you. And today, you were quiet. That means it worked. One morning, after a week of silence and routine, the nurse informs you that you're to be evaluated by a new physician. She says it like it's a reward, though her tone is no different from when she announces chamber pot inspections or vinegar water at breakfast. Still, the word new makes your stomach shift. A new face, a new voice. Maybe this time, someone will listen. They allow you to wash first, not fully, just your face and hands, a damp cloth over the neck. Your dress is wrinkled and stained, but no one offers another. The nurse tucks your hair behind your ears and smooths the front of your shift, as though she's preparing a doll for presentation. You don't ask what you're supposed to say. You already know the stakes. Speak carefully, clearly, and above all, calmly. Any mistake will follow you. You're brought to a different part of the hospital, an upper floor you've never seen, with wider halls and a faint smell of lemon oil masking something older. The room you enter has a rug, faded but still bright enough to look intentional. There are 2 chairs, a desk, a shelf of books no one reads. The window is narrow but clear, and for the first time in weeks, you see the city beyond the wall. The doctor is seated already. He's younger than you expected. His wig is neat, his coat clean, his hands folded on the desk. He looks up and smiles in a way that's meant to put you at ease, though it doesn't reach his eyes. He tells you to sit. You do. He begins with polite questions. Your name, your age, the year, which you get wrong by a month. He doesn't correct you. He asks about your sleep, your appetite, your memories of home. You answer softly but with care, aware of how each word might be recorded. You avoid anything that might sound emotional. You keep your hands in your lap, and your voice even. You do not mention the spinning chair. He asks if you know why you were brought here. You say yes. You say it was grief, mistaken for something else, that you were mourning, that you spoke too freely at the wrong time, and someone took offence. You do not name names. You say it was a misunderstanding, that you are well now, that you are willing to follow the routine, to accept instruction, to be useful. He nods occasionally, as if you're confirming what he already believes. He does not interrupt, but his eyes flick once to the side of the desk, where your file rests half open. You can't see what's inside, but the sight of it makes your throat tighten. Your story is already in there, in someone else's handwriting, reduced to whatever they chose to notice. He asks if you ever hear voices. You say no. He asks if you felt anger toward your keepers. You hesitate, then say no. He asks if you feel restlessness. You say sometimes. He nods more quickly at that. The interview ends after less than half an hour. He thanks you for your time. You stand a little too quickly and sway slightly. He doesn't offer his hand. The nurse is already waiting at the door. You're taken back down the corridor without another word. Later that day, while you're being moved from one sitting room to another, the nurse leaves your file unattended on a bench beside the tray of ledger books. She's called away briefly. Someone down the hall has slipped or shouted or both. For the first time, you are alone with your name in ink. You don't read much, just a page, maybe two, but it's enough. The phrases are written with flourish, as if aesthetic mattered more than accuracy. Displays moments of coherence, but remains delusional, fixated on release. Speaks with unusual emphasis on personal liberty. Your words, meant to demonstrate calm, structure, rationality, have been twisted. Your insistence that you're not mad is recorded as evidence that you are. Your composure is marked as mimicry, your clarity as manipulation. You're described as combative. You do not recall raising your voice. You are described as unreliable. You answered every question. Your name is underlined twice in red. Someone has bracketed the phrase, does not recognize her condition, and written a small X beside it. You hear the nurse's footsteps returning and step away from the desk. She doesn't notice your brief pause. Or perhaps she does, and doesn't care. She's already balancing the tray with one hand and motioning for you to follow. Back in your room, you sit on the edge of your cot and stare at the wall. The crack above your bed is shaped like a river now, long and branching, impossible to follow. You try to remember what you said to the doctor. You try to figure out which part of your sentence became a symptom. You try to untangle how your attempt at reason turned into something pathological. You cannot find the thread. That's when you realize recovery was never the goal. Not here, not for you. The system is not interested in your healing. It is interested in your reduction, in making you less of a question, easier to manage, easier to forget. Your file is not a record of who you are. It is a weapon shaped like documentation. And now, no matter what you say, the page will speak louder. It already has. The newcomer arrives one afternoon, carried between two attendants, who walk with the practiced patience of men used to dead weight. She isn't unconscious, but she's close. Her head lolls from side to side, her hair clinging to her cheek in damp strands. Her shoes are missing, and her stockings are torn. One of her sleeves is still half buttoned. She smells faintly of laudanum, sweat, and something bitter beneath. Grief, perhaps, or fear. It's hard to tell the difference anymore. They place her on the empty cot in your room. The one near the door, the one that's been unoccupied since the last woman stopped speaking and was quietly taken away in the night. No explanation, no notice, just one less body in the morning count. The new woman moans softly as they settle her. One of the attendants adjusts her blanket. The other makes a note in a small book and walks out. No name is spoken, no details offered. You're left with a new roommate and the hollow shape of someone else's absence. She wakes later that evening, just after supper, and begins to cry. At first it's soft, a whispering sort of sorrow that seems to sit behind the eyes rather than come from the throat. But then it builds. Her breathing hitches and her hands twist the edge of the blanket until her knuckles go white. She says his name once, then again. You can't tell if it's her husband, her brother, or a son. She doesn't explain. When the nurse comes to check the chamber pots, the woman sits up and says, I'm not supposed to be here. I only grieve too loudly. Her voice is raw but coherent. Her posture is wrong though. Too upright. Too hopeful. She still thinks there's been a mistake. The nurse tells her to lie down. She refuses. The nurse calls for help. 2 orderlies arrive and guide her back into bed without force, but with the kind of pressure that's difficult to argue with. Afterward, she doesn't speak again for the rest of the night. You don't ask her name. She doesn't ask yours. The rules have grown stricter since the new nurse arrived, and the warning against fraternizing has been repeated often enough to stick. Still, when you pass her water the next morning, your fingers brush hers, and she clings to them just a moment too long. It isn't much, but it's enough. The nurse glares. You pretend not to notice. Over the next 2 days, the newcomer alternates between silence and pleas. She mutters to herself about letters, about church friends, who will surely come. She insists her husband would never have signed anything, that he must be looking for her even now. When no one answers, she raises her voice. That gets the attention she doesn't want. The spinning chair is not used on her, at least not yet, but she's moved to the wall-facing bench during sitting hours. She's given separate chores, meaningless ones, like folding cloth that will never be used. At meals, her bowl is set down just a little later than the others. At night, her blanket is thinner. You try to speak to her once gently, just to say that it's best not to cry in front of the nurse. She nods as if she understands. Then later that evening, she cries anyway. Louder this time, messier. She throws the tin cup against the floor. It dents but doesn't break. She doesn't either. The nurse does not speak to her, just walks away. On the 3rd night, she doesn't sleep. You hear her muttering for hours, a soft chant of names and questions. What day is it? Who brought me here? Where is my ring? You hear the creak of her cot, the shift of her limbs beneath the blanket. She is trying not to scream. When morning comes, the cot is empty. You wake to find the room quiet and already swept. The newcomer's blanket is folded at the foot of the bed. Her bowl is gone. Her shift has been taken. No one speaks about where she went. The nurse checks the room's corners with the same routine as always. When she reaches the empty bed, she doesn't pause, doesn't blink. Just writes 2 beside your room number and moves on. You want to ask, but you don't. You want to say her name, but you realise you never learned it. That night, they don't change the straw. You're told to sleep in the bed she used. You hesitate only a second. The nurse notices. She doesn't say anything, just lingers long enough to make sure you comply. The mattress is still shaped to her form. You lie down on the same curve, facing the same wall. There's a faint imprint on the wall near the headboard, a smudge where she must have rested her forehead. During those hours, she refused to speak. You consider turning the other way. You don't. By morning, her scent has faded. By the end of the day, the other women have already stopped glancing toward the empty cot. A new task has been added to your routine, and a new face will arrive eventually. They always do. You try to remember the name she said when she cried, the one she repeated over and over, like a charm or a curse. It's gone now, blurred with the voices in the corridor and the footsteps of the nurse pacing outside the door. You forget her name, you forget the shape of her voice, but you remember how tightly she gripped your fingers when you passed the cup, and for that you are quietly punished. No one answers when you speak, so you stop. It doesn't happen all at once. At first, you hold on to polite phrases. Thank you. Yes, nurse, excuse me. You wait for eye contact, for nods, for the gentle confirmations of mutual presence. They don't come. You say good morning at breakfast. No one replies. You ask if the blanket can be washed. The nurse keeps walking. You ask what day it is. The question disappears before it reaches the end of the hallway. You begin to ration your words, using them only when necessary, but even those are met with blank looks or small dismissive gestures. One day, you ask a simple question. May I have water? The nurse pauses, looks past you, and writes something down. You are not given a cup. After that, you go silent. It's easier in a way, quieter. You find that not speaking takes less energy than speaking into a void. You mouth the words in your head instead, practicing old conversations, turning them over like stones. Your voice, once tethered to breath and air, becomes internal, private, safe. You do not know if this makes you calmer or only harder to understand. The others don't seem to notice the change. The humming woman hums. The weeping woman sleeps with her face to the wall. In the hallway, the noises blend into a kind of fog, indistinct and ceaseless. Someone mutters near the stairwell. Someone laughs, high and sharp, and is quickly silenced. The clatter of a dropped bowl echoes like thunder. The rest is the shuffle of slippered feet, the sigh of iron hinges, the dragging of cloth against stone. You forget what your own voice sounds like. You try to recall it once, late at night, whispering a line from a hymn you learned as a child. The words come out cracked and dry. Your throat burns. You do not try again. Your thoughts move slower now. They drift instead of forming, scattered like ash in water. You begin to stare at things for long periods. Your fingers, the knot in the curtain cord, the way the sunlight creeps across the wall and then vanishes. You watch your hands for nearly an hour one afternoon. They look thinner, or longer, or unfamiliar. The knuckles seem farther apart. The nails have begun to peel at the edges. You count the bones, just to be sure they are all still there. Meals arrive with mechanical regularity, though you no longer remember if they're good or bad. You eat because it's expected. You chew because it's easier than explaining why you won't. The bread is always damp, the broth always thin. Once you're given a slice of something red and hard. You don't ask what it is. The nurse visits every morning, same as always. She checks the ledger, counts the bowls, inspects the chamber pots. You stop noticing when she enters. She becomes part of the architecture. A door opening, a shadow crossing the room, the brief clatter of porcelain. She speaks less now, even to the others. Perhaps she's tired. Perhaps she knows none of you will answer. You start to lose track of time altogether. Not just the days, but the idea of them. The bell still rings in the distance, but you can't tell if it signals breakfast or bed. You learn to measure time by absurdity. The scratch in your throat after a bad night. The slow healing of a bruise on your hip you don't remember getting. The way your cot smells stronger every few days until someone finally replaces the straw. Once you dream that you're outside. You're sitting beneath a tree and the leaves move like breath. In the dream, someone calls your name. Not cruelly, not with concern, just casually, like a neighbour greeting you across the lane. You wake before you can see their face. You try to hold on to the sound of your name, but it slips away before the chamber pot is emptied. You stop trying to remember what day it is, or what month, or what season. The light from the window shifts, but without pattern. Some mornings are grey, some are bright, some are nothing at all. You sleep when your body demands it, and wake when the ward begins to move around you. You no longer participate in chores. No one asks you to. You sit when told. You stand when gestured to. You are moved through the day like a cup being placed on a shelf, and you accept it. There is no anger in you anymore. Not even sorrow. Just the sensation of watching everything from somewhere slightly behind your own eyes. The nurse calls you by the wrong name one morning. You do not correct her. She does not notice. Later that day, a visitor walks past the ward. A man with silver buttons and a fur-lined coat. He glances through the bars and pauses on your face. You stare back, unsure if you should look away. He blinks once, turns, and keeps walking. You wonder if you knew him once, or if he only thought he recognized something in you. That night, as you fold your shift at the end of your cot, you realize that you haven't spoken in 5 days, or 10, or more. The exact number escapes you. You sit with the folded cloth in your lap, staring at the worn seam, and try to remember the last sentence you said aloud. It doesn't come, and somehow that fact doesn't frighten you. You no longer notice when the nurse enters. You no longer wait for her to leave. They come for you without warning. Again, it's just after breakfast. You're still seated near the wall, your spoon resting untouched in a shallow bowl of grey broth. The nurse approaches without speaking. She taps the ledger once, closes it, and jerks her chin toward the hallway. 2 attendants are already waiting near the door. Their hands are empty, but their posture tells you everything. You stand slowly. You do not ask where you're going. You've learned that curiosity is not rewarded here. One of the attendants walks behind you, the other ahead. You're guided down a corridor you've only seen once before, the one with the curved ceiling and pale yellow walls. The lamps here burn brighter, but the air is colder and the doors are heavier. You feel it in your teeth. They lead you into a room that is not unfamiliar, though you wish it were. You recognise the chair. You recognise the basin beside it. But this time, there's something else waiting. A cloth rolled neatly on a tray, a bottle with no label, a metal rod that catches the light as they set it down. The physician is there, seated behind a small desk with no paper on it. He doesn't look up until the door closes. Then he smiles, not warmly, not cruelly, just as if this is routine. He says you've been selected for a calming intervention. You nod without fully knowing what that means. He gestures to the chair. You sit. They strap you in again. Arms, legs, chest. Your wrists are trembling. Your fingers try to curl, but the straps are too tight. You feel the leather dig into your upper arms as the final loop is pulled snug around your forehead. You don't resist. You don't even speak. Then one of the nurses approaches with a gag. A strip of cloth folded and tied. You flinch for the first time in days, but they move quickly. It's pushed into your mouth and knotted behind your head. You taste something sour. Wool, perhaps, or something chemical underneath. Your jaw aches before they've even begun. The physician dips a gloved hand into the small jar on the tray. The substance inside is thick and greyish-white, with a faint green sheen. It smells medicinal, but not clean. Something between menthol and rot. He parts your hair without care, fingers moving in quick clinical motions. Then he begins to apply the salve. It burns, not all at once, not like fire, but in slow creeping tendrils, like ants under your scalp. You feel it soaking into the skin above your ears, running in uneven lines along your skull. The sensation sharpens as it spreads. You can't cry out. The gag presses your tongue down until your jaw locks. Your breath comes fast through your nose. The room tilts slightly, or maybe your body does. The physician murmurs something to the nurse. She replies. You hear neither. Only the rush of your own heartbeat in your ears. The soft clink of the bottle as it's replaced on the tray. You think you see the metal rod move. You hope it's not meant for you. And then something happens. Not a moment, not an action, just a blur, a fracture in memory. One breath leads into the next and the space between vanishes. You do not remember closing your eyes, but when you open them, the light has changed. The room is different. You're no longer in the chair. You're lying down, somewhere else. Your bed. You're back in your cot, staring up at the familiar stain on the ceiling. The one that looks like a withered tree. The blanket is pulled over your chest. Your hands are clean, folded neatly atop your stomach. Your mouth is dry, your throat sore. You reach up to touch your scalp, and your fingers come away sticky. When you look down, there are flecks of something red and brown beneath your nails. Blood. You try to sit up, but your head pulses sharply, a wave of nausea rising with the motion. You stop. Breathe. Your ears are ringing, a high, thin tone like the edge of a blade. You press your palms to either side of your head and feel crusted scabs behind your ears. Small, but raw. You don't know what they did. Not exactly, only that something was taken. You turn your head slightly and see the nurse standing in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She says, "Rest. You'll feel better tomorrow." Then she steps back and closes the door. You try to remember what happened in the room. You try to reconstruct the sequence, The straps, the gag, the salve, the physician's hands. But after that, there's only static. A pale fog with no shape, no sound, no edge to cling to. Your thoughts slide across it and vanish. You aren't sure if minutes passed or hours. You aren't sure if you lost consciousness or were made to forget. At some point, the humming woman glances over. She watches you for a moment too long, then looks away again. She knows, or suspects, or recognizes the signs. You lie still beneath the blanket. The mattress feels thinner now. The light in the room seems too sharp. Everything has an edge you didn't notice before. The crack in the floor, the frayed seam in your sleeve, the crooked shadow beneath the basin. You close your eyes and listen to the ringing, and you try not to wonder what part of you didn't come back. It starts with something small. A name on the morning roster, one you've seen every day for weeks, is missing. It's scrawled in the same neat hand as always, the same slanted ink, but where there were once 14 names, there are now 13. You read the list 3 times just to be sure. You trace the column with your fingertip until you reach the gap. No one remarks on it. No one asks. The nurse doesn't pause during her count. The bowls are set out as if nothing has changed. You glance around the ward searching for the absent woman, the one who mumbled prayers during chores, who always sat second from the end. Her cot is empty, but no cleaner than usual. The blanket is folded. The pillow is indented. It looks like someone left in a hurry, or perhaps not at all. You think briefly of asking the nurse, but the hesitation is enough to stop you. You remember the last time someone questioned the roster. That woman was moved the same day, and her name was never written down again. The ledger simply skipped over her, as if she'd never been there. Later in the evening, the woman beside you stops moving. She had been ill for days, though no one called it that. She'd stopped eating 3 meals ago. Her breathing had grown shallow and uneven, each exhale a small effort. You told the nurse yesterday. She nodded and made a note. This morning the nurse didn't check her eyes, didn't touch her wrist, just placed her bowl on the stool beside the bed and left. The food sat untouched until supper, then vanished with the rest. Now the woman is very still. Her hands are folded on her stomach the way yours were after the last treatment, but too neatly, too deliberately. Her mouth is slightly open. Her eyes are closed. You know before you reach over. You know before your fingers touch hers. Cold, stiff, unmoving. You alert the nurse, speaking softly, without panic. She enters the room, walks to the cot, and stands for a long moment in silence. Then she reaches into the folds of her apron, pulls out a thin cloth, and drapes it over the woman's face. There is no alarm, no urgency, just procedure. No one comes to collect her. Hours pass. You're told to continue with your routine. Chores, sitting time, supper. The nurse does not mention the body in the room. She does not open the window. She does not lower her voice. The others glance occasionally, but only once. Staring is discouraged. When night comes, the woman's cot is still occupied. You sleep with your back to her, blanket pulled high, trying not to listen to the soundlessness of someone who will not wake. In the morning, they remove her. 2 orderlies enter before the bell, their boots heavy on the floor. They don't speak. One lifts the cot mattress by the corners, folding the body inside the blanket like a bundle of linen. The other carries a rope. They don't use it. Instead, they each take a side and carry her out like furniture. The nurse watches. She doesn't write anything down. The cot is left empty, the blanket gone, the name gone. That afternoon, the nurse calls you by the wrong name. It happens in the hallway. She's directing patients back from the sitting room, her tone clipped and efficient. When she gestures to you, she uses the other woman's name, not softly, not uncertainly, as though it has always been yours. You hesitate. You open your mouth and say, "That's not me." She looks up surprised, then frowns. She's confused again, she says to the orderly beside her, who nods without interest. They write something in the ledger. You are not corrected. You are not apologised to. You are returned to your room. For the rest of the day, no one calls you anything. You begin to doubt your own protest. Had you misheard her? Or did she simply misspeak? The woman is gone now. Her name is gone. If it has been assigned to you, then perhaps it belongs to you now. Perhaps names in this place are not meant to last, only to fill spaces. That night, you ask to see the roster again. The nurse gives you a strange look, but allows it. You hold the list with steady hands, scanning each line, each letter. There's the name, the dead woman's, intact, unmarked. Yours, however, is different. It's there, still on the page, but it's near the bottom now, shifted down. The handwriting beside it is lighter, more hesitant, and across the last few letters someone has drawn a faint, wavering line. Not quite a strike, not quite an erasure, just enough to cast doubt. You stare at it for a long time, uncertain what it means. Perhaps it's a mistake, or a warning, or a preparation. You hand the page back. The nurse doesn't comment. In the days that follow, no one uses your name at all. Instructions are given without direction. Chores are assigned with gestures. Bowls are set beside your cot in silence. The woman who hums no longer glances your way. You don't know if she recognizes you, or if your shape has simply blended with the rest. You begin to feel transparent. Not invisible exactly, just thin, like smoke near a window, like the echo of something that was once heavier. And you realize, in the quiet between the nurse's footsteps and the rattle of keys, that your disappearance has already begun. It just hasn't been filed yet. You sit in your chair, unmoving. It is not that you're tired, though you are. And it's not that your legs hurt, though they do. It's that the act of moving feels unnecessary now. There is nothing new to approach, nothing different to see. The room holds no surprises, neither do the people in it. You have learned the shape of the day, the texture of it, the sound it makes as it passes. You sit by the window, the one with grime so thick it filters the light into a dull grey blur. You used to wonder what lay beyond it. Now you simply let the sunlight fall against your shoulder and accept that it means the hour is passing. You do not press your face to the glass. You do not squint through the nails driven into the frame. You stopped asking why the windows were sealed. Some things are better when they're not asked about. You hum sometimes, not music, not melody, just a quiet note under your breath, low and flat, almost inaudible. You whisper too, but only when the others are asleep or turned away. It is not conversation, it's sound for the sake of sound. Just enough to remind yourself your throat still works. You speak when spoken to. You smile when prompted. You eat when the bowl is placed in front of you, and never before. You've learned to fold your blanket the way they prefer. Corners aligned, edges neat. You don't fold it differently, even by accident. You've learned not to stand before the nurse gestures. You don't look toward the staff when they pass. You keep your eyes on your lap, your hands tucked gently into your sleeves. When the physician visits the ward, he walks past you without pausing. There is no longer any curiosity in his glance. You're no longer a puzzle, no longer a risk. You are stable, quiet, docile. He marks something in the ledger, a check perhaps, or a line. You do not ask what it means. You are not called to therapy anymore. The spinning chair has not moved in months. The jar with the pale salve remains unopened on the tray in the treatment room. Once, a new patient was brought past your door. She cried for her mother. You did not rise, you did not look. She was removed after 4 days. Her bed now holds someone else. The nurse who once slapped your hand now pats your shoulder when you obey. She calls you dear or clever girl. You nod when she does. You say thank you because it is expected. And when she says, "You're much improved," or you smile. And she's right. You no longer weep when the screams echo down the corridor. You no longer flinch when the bolts scrape shut behind the nurse. You no longer track time, or seasons, or who has left. You do not ask about names. You do not ask to write. You do not ask to leave. You've stopped counting the bones in your fingers. The woman who hums has begun to forget verses. Her tune skips now, loops strangely. You nod along anyway. You don't correct her. You're not sure anymore which version was right. The other woman, the one who never speaks, still faces the wall. You have stopped wondering what she thinks about. You no longer imagine what might be hidden in her silence. You've come to understand that some silences aren't waiting to be filled. They are whole things, complete. Once the nurse asked if you remembered your birthday. You said no. She smiled, wrote something down, and told you not to worry. That not remembering meant you were healing. You agreed with her. You even believed her for a moment. Or you wanted to. You still dream, though not often. And when you do, the dreams are colourless and slow. You walk corridors that never end, speak to faces without names, search for something vague and unimportant. When you wake, there is no disorientation. You already knew where you were. Your body still aches, your back from the cot, your legs from stillness, your scalp from whatever happened in that final treatment room. But you no longer wince. You've learned to wear the pain like clothing. It fits now, familiar. The crack above your bed has widened slightly. You watched it happen but said nothing. It reminds you of a root, or maybe a vein, something alive beneath the surface. You find it comforting. It means the building is changing, even if you're not. Once, during supper, a visitor walked past the ward. He paused at the bars and asked the nurse if anyone there was nearly ready. She pointed toward the woman who hums. He looked at you briefly, then away again. You didn't mind. You didn't wonder what ready meant. There is a pencil mark near your name on the roster. Just a faint tick, nothing more. It comes and goes. Sometimes it's rubbed out. Sometimes it returns. You don't ask. You no longer think in full sentences, more like shapes, tones. You feel things without needing to name them. Cold, hunger, relief. You used to think this was a loss. Now it feels more like shedding. The way a tree loses leaves before winter. Not dead, just quieter. And when you sit in the chair, unmoving, your hands folded in your lap, your back straight, your gaze soft and far away, the nurse smiles as she walks past. You are much improved. You've stopped resisting. You've learned to sit still, and you no longer try to leave. That brings us to the end of tonight's descent. Quiet, clinical, and padded in good intentions. If you're still awake, thank you for sitting through the silence, the spinning, and the slow erasure of a name spoken one time too many. History often remembers Bedlam as chaos, but the truth is colder than that. Measured, observed, and convinced it was helping. If you'd like early access to more stories like this, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other historical topics you'd like to see covered. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S. and Amanda Lamke. Sleep well.